Hare Krishna, we're starting answering for the thought-provoking questions. We will choose 20 of them just randomly. And Madan Mahaprabhu will answer spontaneously for them. Hare Krishna. How can we understand that Krishna is the source of Vishnu and not the other way around?
Well, philosophically, Krishna and Vishnu are co-eternal. But Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he manifests the complete range of rasas. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his discussion with Venkatabhatta in South India, quoted that verse, Siddhanta testo abhyadepi, Shrisha Krishna Swarupayaho, Rasenat Krishyate Krishna Rupaya Sharsastiti, in which it is explained that from the point of Siddhanta, there is no difference between Vishnu and Krishna. But from the point of rasa, Krishna manifests more rasas and therefore his form is considered superior. And also Srimad Bhagavatam explains Krishna is the source of all incarnations of the Lord in this world, in the famous verse, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So it's both oneness and difference. Difference from the point of rasa and oneness from the point of tattva.
The second one question, is the embodied soul active or inactive? Briefly explain your answer.
Yeah, the embodied soul is active in the sense of desiring to enjoy separately from Krishna. That's the embodied soul's activity. Otherwise, Srila Prabhupada explains in the Bhagavad Gita also, it is explained that the living entity is inactive because he cannot interact with the material world independently. Krishna, in the form of Super Soul, arranges for the living entity to have his desires fulfilled in the material world. And the actual activity of the spiritual soul is enacted in the spiritual world in his or her relationship with Krishna.
Briefly explain how the soul is unchangeable and immovable, which is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita 2.24.
Well, Srila explains that the word immovable means that the soul cannot be removed from the region of the heart. And unchangeable means that it never changes its original nature, spiritual spark of the living entity and the eternal servant of Krishna. So the exact word is kutastha, which means that the living entity never moves away or never changes his or its nature.
Can someone be a kanistha-adhikari and pure devotee at the same time? Briefly.
It's an interesting question because Srila Prabhupada explains in Madhya Lila, chapter 15, verse 106, he says, and I quote, that if a devotee follows the spiritual master strictly, especially in his understanding that the Supreme Lord is not different from his holy name, and he chants the holy name attentively, trying to avoid offenses, and worships the deity under the direction of the spiritual master, then such a kanistha-adhikari or neophyte is also a pure devotee. That's his exact words, and he repeats it several times in the purport. And as a proof, he says that if such a devotee strictly follows his spiritual master, even though he's a kanistha-adhikari or neophyte, he is a pure devotee because others can become devotees by his association. So he is pure by intention, by his faith. But purity can also be judged by one's level. From that point of view, he still has a way to go to the level of madhyama and uttama to attain complete purity in his status as a devotee of Krishna. But his faith in Krishna's service, that starts with following the orders of the spiritual master, makes him pure enough to be considered a pure devotee.
Thank you. Please give a couple examples of bhakti in the mode of ignorance.
In the mode of ignorance, the example Prabhupada gives in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the story of deity trying to perform austerities to get a son that would kill Indra. So her intention was to take revenge on Indra for his complicity in the killing of her son Hiranyaksha. And so this is an example of one's being motivated by anger or desire to harm others or envy. And also Indra, as far as the second question, a second example, he was helping deity in her service, but with the intention to find faults and thwart her austerities and her intention to beget a child that would kill Indra. So both of them were motivated by the mode of ignorance, in that they were trying to harm each other.
How is Arjuna and an eternal associate of the Lord becomes bewildered?
Srila Prabhupada explains in the Bhagavad Gita that Arjuna played the role of a bewildered soul, so Krishna could explain to him the Bhagavad Gita for our benefit. Otherwise, he is an eternal associate of the Lord and never becomes bewildered by Maya.
Right? What does it mean that the pure devotee's body is spiritual?
Srila Prabhupada explains that he or she, pure devotees, could be of any gender, they use their material body, made of material elements, fully for the service of Krishna, and because of that, this body becomes spiritualized, just like a iron rod placed in the fire becomes red hot and acts just like a fire. In that sense, the body of a pure devotee is becoming spiritualized and starts acting like a spirit. There is more to this question, but that's the basic understanding.
Is a nitya-siddha guru better than a sadhana-siddha guru?
It's a difficult question, because you cannot deny that when a nitya-siddha guru comes from the spiritual world and he or she, they perform activities which cannot be enacted by, like you could say, regular gurus. And Srila Prabhupada is a nitya-siddha guru, is an example of that. And there are so many of them actually in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, devotees who came here from the spiritual world with him or on his order or request, and performed activities which cannot be emulated or reproduced by quote-unquote regular gurus. That's on the one hand. But on the other hand, Srila Prabhupada explains that nitya-siddha and sadhana-siddha, when they attain perfection, both of them are perfect, and there is no need to draw any distinction between them for any intents in purposes, especially in ISKCON, because we operate in a multi-guru environment. Srila Prabhupada made it very practical for us to understand who is eligible and competent enough to act as a pure devotee. He says, and I quote in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, that even if a follower is not a pure devotee, he follows a pure devotee, nitya-siddha, nitya, eternal liberated soul, strictly, then his actions or activities in the role of a guru are as good as those of liberated souls. And also Prabhupada says famously in Chaitanya Charitamrita that anyone who participates in Lord Chaitanya's preaching mission is considered to be nitya-siddha. Nitya-siddha karimani, he quotes Narottam Das Thakur. Gaurangera Sangha Gane Nitya-siddha karimani. He says, I consider all of them, whoever takes part in Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtana mission, to be nitya-siddha devotees. That's his words in Madhya Lila, 8th chapter, verse 89.
Is guru supposed to know past, present and future tri-kala-jna?
No, that's very short. He doesn't have to know. And tri-kala-jna is not part of the guru qualifications. But pure devotees can know by the mercy of Krishna past, present and future, and Prabhupada demonstrated that. Guru knows as much as Krishna allows him to know to help his disciple. And we can also see how in the life of gurus and their interactions, sometimes guru manifests omniscience enough to help his disciple for, in a limited sense, of course, omniscience, in a sense to help him enough in his or her spiritual life.
Do statements from Srila Prabhupada's letters have less authority than his statements in the books?
Not always. Some letters of Srila Prabhupada were written by him specifically to address very important philosophical or spiritual issues, and those letters written to him specifically to address them have no less authority than his general statements in books. One of the examples is, for instance, his letter written about the crow and tal fruit logic, in which he addresses Jiva Tattva. So that letter, written specifically to explain his teachings on that topic, holds no less authority than his statements in the books. And there are many other examples like that.
Is this question from second section? Is illicit sex all sex outside of marriage, or even sex within marriage without the intention of having children?
Srila Prabhupada was very clear on this point. Illicit sex is any sexual activity, even within marriage, which is done without the intention of begetting children. He was very clear, and he repeatedly stated that in his purports, in his lectures, in his letters. Prabhupada understood also who he dealt with, and he understood there would be some struggle for devotees with this particular principle, but he was very clear on this and made no compromise on the principle, while accommodating those who were still struggling to follow it.
Why devotees need to get up before brahma-muhurta?
Well, there are many answers to this question, and an esoteric answer would be to explain how brahma-muhurta is very conducive for spiritual life, and whatever we do in brahma-muhurta makes a very strong impression on our mind and senses, and makes us more attuned and more receptive to spiritual practices. But it's simple, and that simple answer for me is enough, because Prabhupada told us to do that. He said that if one doesn't get up before 4 o'clock regularly, doesn't follow the sadhana, and doesn't chant in the morning, then his spiritual life was almost all but non-existent. He said that in many letters. So devotees should aspire to follow his instructions, regardless of the exact philosophical, esoteric underpinnings for them. But other than that, yes, brahma-muhurta is considered to be the most conducive for spiritual life.
What is more serious, sensual fall downs or philosophical deviations?
Sensual fall downs or philosophical deviations, what's more serious? Well, it depends on the severity of both, but if there is a way to, like in all equal circumstances, put the same amount of seriousness on both, and of course philosophical deviations are more serious because they create a wrong worldview or perception of faith that would then justify just anything, including sensual or other fall downs. So it's permissible, you could say, acceptable, not permissible, but understandable if a devotee out of his or her spiritual weakness falls down to senses but remains at heart committed to devotional service and makes no compromise internally. And acharyas explain such a situation as very actually conducive for spiritual life because it leads one to humility and repentance. So after some time such a repentant devotee may expect the Lord's mercy, but if someone philosophically deviates and justifies his fall downs, then there is very little hope. So yes, philosophical is more serious.
Are you personally ready to take birth again and again to save all of your disciples?
Well, Srila Prabhupada explained that in a few letters and lectures. He told his disciples, do not make me come back again to take birth. And he quoted the example of Bilamangal Thakur. He said that in his case, his guru had to take birth as a prostitute, maybe not literally, but to sober him up, make him sober, and enlighten him to the spiritual path. And Prabhupada says, don't make me come back again to deliver you. So Srila Prabhupada was ready to do that, and we should be ready to assist him, because it's not that the guru in our society necessarily does everything himself, but we should be ready to help Srila Prabhupada to extend his mercy and his teachings and his example to our dependents, and then leave it in his hands, whatever he decides. Send us back for them, or empower someone else, or maybe, as he promises in his letter to Brahmananda in 1968, for the sake of those of my disciples who haven't been delivered along with me, if they help me in my service to my spiritual master, I'm ready to personally come for them from Goloka Vrindavan. So I hope it will include also gurus.
What to do if we don't agree with the GBC decision?
We can respectfully present our disagreements to the GBC, substantiate them, hopefully or ideally word them in the form of a proposal, support our disagreements, present them in a very respectful and objective manner, and then leave it in their hands, because Prabhupada really wanted us to cooperate with the GBC as the ultimate managerial authority. We don't have to agree with all the decisions of our authorities, but we should follow them, and we should also respect the responsibility they bear. And that's how Prabhupada designed ISKCON. We don't have to disagree with everything on all points with everybody, but we should follow the same principles and the same decisions made by the GBC Ultimate Managerial Authority.
Are sannyasi guru better than grihastha guru?
No. Kiba vipra kiba nyasya shudra keninai. Ei Krishna tataveti sei guru hai. And Srila Prabhupada specifically addresses this question in many of his classes and purports, emphasizing how thinking that a sannyasi guru is better than a grihastha guru is actually a deviation. There have been historical deviations at that point in our sampradaya, like Ramachandra Kaviraj, for which he was, from what I understand, he was excommunicated from our sampradaya. So no.
Can brahmacari guru marry a disciple?
No.
Can GBC Zonal Secretary prohibit a guru from initiation in a particular place?
Yes, the GBC Zonal Secretary has such a provision. They can disallow particular gurus to initiate in their zones, and there have been examples of that, of such decisions in ISKCON.
Is it okay for grihasthas to accept a salary from the temple?
It's a question up to the temple management. Prabhupada didn't want anyone to receive salaries in our temples. That was back in the day. How this principle described by Srila Prabhupada or maintained by him applies nowadays is not for me to decide. I haven't been exposed to such situations.
What if a disciple has a different opinion than the guru on the managerial issues?
Well, he can present these managerial disagreements to the guru and see what he has to say.
Why should we remain in ISKCON?
And managerial decisions are not necessarily the points that disallow disagreements between guru and disciple. But okay, why should we remain in ISKCON?
Why should we remain in ISKCON?
Oh, Srila Prabhupada writes in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th chapter, verse 11, that anyone who thinks that he can develop spiritually without being in the international society of Krishna consciousness lives in a great hallucination. So, at least for us, Prabhupada's followers, those who have been saved by Srila Prabhupada, it's the only way to pay back to him our debt of gratitude to remain in his society that gave us everything in spiritual life.
This explains Srila Prabhupada quote. Srila Prabhupada wrote, "Women are generally considered less intelligent." Srimad Bhagavatam 7-35.
Yeah, Srila Prabhupada made such statements. He also made other statements about ladies. He said that when a woman becomes a devotee of Krishna, then that's the highest manifestation of her intelligence. And such, he says that in Chaitanya Charitamrita, such women, such girls are no less than their spiritual brothers. And he also spoke very approvingly of the intelligence of his disciples, ladies, when applied in devotional service. So he emphasized that material natures could be different, and they could also impose certain limitations on those who have these material natures. But when one comes sincerely to devotional service, then his or her material natures become irrelevant for one's spiritual intelligence and spiritual development.
What is wrong with singing Radhe Radhe during kirtan?
Srila Prabhupada never did it. Prabhupada established very certain, very clear standards for worship of Krishna by kirtan, and he himself corrected disciples when they started getting carried away by some maybe nice and even maybe spiritual, but not approved by him, styles and varieties of kirtan. So on a few occasions, Prabhupada told disciples not to chant anything except Hare Krishna and kirtans. So there is a GBC resolution that also monitors, regulates the chanting of Radhe Srimati Radharani's holy names in kirtans that is supported and based on Prabhupada's instructions, and interested parties could refer to that resolution. Basically, it limits the chanting of Srimati Radharani's holy names to Radhashtami and such intimate festivals in her honor.
Srila Prabhupada said that by the year 2000, no one will see the light of a day. Mm-hmm. Cities will be forced to live underground. Mm-hmm. How to explain that it didn't happen?
Srila Prabhupada didn't always make literal predictions. Sometimes he spoke as a poet. He himself was dubbed as a Kaviraj, as a poet, by his spiritual master and his godbrothers. So sometimes Prabhupada allowed poetic license which doesn't invalidate what he said, but he used hyperbole and overemphasis on certain aspects of reality as he saw it, to make his disciples more inspired to follow the principles of devotional service, more eager to preach. That's one explanation. Sometimes he used such hyperbole in his preaching. Another explanation, as Prabhupada himself offered when he predicted famously in World War III in 1975 or 76, which didn't happen, and his disciples asked him why it didn't happen. Prabhupada said Krishna changed his mind. So that explains, and it's not just a diversion or escape from responsibility. Prabhupada explains that by our movement preaching, by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna's holy names, the collective and individual karma of the world changes. And maybe it would have happened if it were not for Krishna's holy names and Sankirtana propagated by Srila Prabhupada and ISKCON across the world. So such statements of Srila Prabhupada could be taken in these ways to understand why some of them do not match the material reality as we see it.
Enough.
Hare Krishna.